So it has come to my attention that a lot of people are uncertain of how to build and what to do and how to make things and all of this. And as you can plainly tell, there is a large structure that I am currently making and living in and, detailing the innards of and so on. So I've decided to set aside a sort of building tutorial that will give me a much more concrete set of, not necessarily instructions, but good bullet points to follow. You really want to keep these principles in mind. So, first thing you want to try is set a palette of blocks. Try not to deviate too greatly from this palette of blocks. Now, as you can see, I've got a little bit of stuff here, some knickknacks, some bric-a-brac, other bits of stuff that will get me there. So I have my palette of lapis and skulk, recessed lighting. In this case, it's sea lanterns, but I can just as easily use other things. Beacons, soul lanterns, torches, crying obsidian in places, things like that. That's just the overall idea, But how do I turn that into something more impressive? So, first things first, geometry. Nobody likes just looking at a flat slab or an undefined blob of whatever material it is you're using. Because I'm making a room here, I want to sort of outline the entire skeleton, if you will. I do not have any idea what it will look like. I am not designing with a clear sort of idea in mind. I'm free-forming all of this. It's just coming right out of my head. This room in particular is going to be a little bit off the beaten path. You'll still be able to get to it, I'm sure. But the best thing to keep in mind is the room is for what purpose? What value does it bring to your structure? And I've decided that a lot of these rooms should be either hub rooms, or they should have some sort of artwork in them, or some kind of distraction to kind of make you want to pause in that room and consider, what the room itself has going for it. This is when you're just sort of laying out the bare bones of your structure. This is the point where a lot of your creativity can flow out, in my opinion. You give yourself the tools to succeed or fail from the beginning simply by choosing the correct shapes and styles you decide to follow. So already right off the bat, I'm going for a somewhat hub-esque kind of place. I'm probably going to put map art in this room when I get around to it, but I'm not entirely certain I want to make this a map art room. This may just have other decoration in it. We'll see. In Black Shard, which is one of the games that I'm currently taking a lot of inspiration from, you end up seeing every now and then, in addition to the weird sort of liminal / Giger-esque spaces that you run across, you'll also occasionally just see art, like just random bits of art just strewn across here, there, and everywhere. Actual paintings, from what I understand. So I kind of wanted to capture that vibe. Like, you'll come inside this room and there will just be a painting or two on these walls. And again, I want to beg you to stay and linger in this space for some amount of time. And I find especially map art on 2B really gets that job done, like, surprisingly well. Example of bad geometry people usually build. Large square things that don't have any real definition to them. Like, for example, this corner right here. I'm not going to say this is bad geometry, but it is lackluster geometry, right? Okay, so you see how this corner curves, bends, so it's all 90-degree angles here, right? That's fine. In and of itself, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with 90-degree angles. But notice how when I was building this corner here, I decided I don't want it to be that. I want it to be a little divot in the corner, because then I can put stuff in this corner, like, for example, some stairs. This varies up the geometry, and I go on later to say that geometry is your most useful asset. Use it. Stairs, slabs, and walls are your best tools to accomplish this. So you want to give people the illusion of depth by using differing sort of angles and differing kinds of, I almost call them like jaggies or jaggedness. Like when you look at a low poly 3D model, you know how you will, especially for the really low poly models like you'd see in a PlayStation game or an N64 game, you'll see there is a very sharp contrast between the background and the model that background happens to be juxtaposed against. That is, obviously in those days, hardware restrictions were what they were, so when it came to like jagged stuff, or jaggies as we used to call them, there's not a whole lot you can do about that, You're gonna have that no matter what. But because Minecraft is so low fidelity in terms of like the visual style, you see how these, everything is still very blocky in Minecraft. And obviously that's what gives Minecraft its charm. But that doesn't mean we have to, like, keep it that way. You know, we can flub it a little bit. We don't have to necessarily pretend that the blocky style is mandatory. We can play around with it a little bit. We can fool the eye and pretend there are curves and there are differing types of geometry we can employ. It isn't always a, hey, here's a wall. Hey, here's an intersection to that wall. Hey, here's this part and this place connects to over here and over there. That's fine. It isn't necessarily bad geometry, but it's lackluster geometry. And that's really what I'm trying to get at. There is no bad geometry per se. It's really more just boring geometry. Because really, at the end of the day, anything you do will have to be, in Minecraft, geometric. There's no avoiding it. Like I said, that's the charm of the game. But that doesn't mean you have to not try to change that. You know, try to give yourself some sort of, I don't know, give yourself a challenge. You know, play around with it. Pretend that you can do the impossible. Your block palette is only one color for now. But then I've also used mostly polished blackstone everywhere for this. That is kind of the nature of the build. You can choose a very, very narrow block palette. Don't feel like you have to choose an extremely diverse block palette. It's okay to have 1 or 2 colors and that's it. If you've ever seen 8-bit or 16-bit or worse, 4-bit color like pixel art, you'll understand that, yeah, limited colors, it isn't the end of the world, you know? If you know how to do it, you can make a lot with a little. So don't be too afraid to limit yourself. I chose raw blackstone on the outside and polished on the inside to both differentiate the outside and the inside, but also to just simply be that sort of lower diversity type of build, I guess is the way to put it. Like, I'm using blackstone and lapis, and skulk on the inside. So I'm really using like 3 major block types. I think it works. It works. You can post a comment down in the comment section down below and tell me what you believe to be a better palette, or what you believe to be a more ideal type of palette, if that's the sort of thing you dabble in. Now, this next part has to do with location, specifically the area in which you live, the general lay of the land, as it were. And location is very important, don't get me wrong. However, depending on the type of build you're making, location may not necessarily matter. For Archon Retia, the name of this build, Archon Retia could really sit anywhere. It is a giant imposing citadel that dominates the landscape in every way it can. So my build is a little more independent of the terrain, but obviously if you were making, say, a medieval castle town or some kind of ice fortress, you know, you wouldn't build that in a savanna or a desert. At least, probably you wouldn't. I mean, maybe you can make a good savanna castle town, I don't know. But predominantly, that's not the type of place you would see those things. And you know, that's okay. Maybe you've found that to be a challenge, and you are trying to make a thing in a not necessarily appropriate location. But hey, you're trying because it's cool. It's cool to challenge yourself. Either way, your best choice that you can make while building is the choice of where to build the thing you're making. That is the strongest choice you will end up having to make. Way more important than the palette, way more important than, especially on 2B2T, way more important than the cost of the materials or whatever else it is you may end up having to factor in. You know, having the location be appropriate is very difficult because, like I said, you wouldn't make, you know, an ice castle in the middle of a fucking forest or in a desert or where have you. You really do have to kind of consider what you're doing and where and why. So, to that end, because my build isn't really considering the location all that hard, I'm not really worried about it. But, you know, I did want this build to sit on land, or mostly over a giant area of land, so I made sure to pick, you know, somewhere that the waterfront property wasn't super dominant. Though we did get a nice little lake out of it, and I was told to build piers coming off the entrances, and I may still do that. I haven't decided yet. And then obviously there are other areas. It just depends on what you're trying to do and why. So never forget that. Number 4, no block is off limits. Don't let the cost get in the way of building your dreams. For example, with this Blackstone Citadel, I've often been asked, where are you getting all your stuff from? Now, obviously, in this case, I didn't get it. All the guys in the devs who, made all the farms and stuff for the Blackstone, the gold, the bartering, all of that, the bots, everything that went into running all of that was not my idea. But even before I had met these people, I was still more or less, figuring out how to make things happen. Again, don't let your memes be dreams, or in this case, your builds. It is important to consider the costs, but at the same time, a handful of blocks, maybe it's not that important. Giving yourself an adequate budget to work in makes sense, but also you should try to shoot for the stars, Yes, you're probably not going to be able to get everything you want. That's why I didn't build anything out of solid netherite. It is a very prohibitively expensive material, but if I really, really wanted to, I probably could just get a bunch of netherite eventually. It would take a while though, but I could do it, most likely. I feel like I could. Would you consider how much time it takes to build something as is important? Yes, of course. Especially in 2B2T time, where you are just at the mercy of the base hunters who will inevitably find you. I get that. You would probably want to weigh the effort that it would take to make something versus the time, versus how long you'll have to actually enjoy it. Because, yeah, there are going to be a lot of nasty people who eventually show up at your doorstep, and they're probably going to just screw you out of your build. I know I've had that happen to me. It's unavoidable, really. That is part and parcel of playing on this server. But that said, no reason you can't try anyway. And then obviously in my case, we had a really, really strong printer module that a bunch of people made, and oh man, was it something else. And it really made the building of this base infinitely easier. So in those kinds of circumstances, yeah, you should totally aim for the stars, but maybe try and do what's reasonable. But also, don't be afraid to cheat. There are no awards for playing by the rules. Have you noticed that? Anytime you are a good little boy or a good little girl, people may laud you and praise you for it, but there aren't any awards for it. Playing by the rules is fine, but it doesn't always get you very far. And maybe if you want to build something cool, well, you have to get far. So yeah, don't be afraid to cheat sometimes, especially when it comes to building and such. I'm not advocating you steal other people's base ideas or schematics off of Planet Minecraft or what have you. Just, use whatever methods and tools are available, and that may include, and this may be on other servers where such things are not necessarily looked upon happily. But I see no problem with baritone, no problem with Lightmatica. Use your tools to your advantage. That's what they're there for. Tools are meant to be used. Use hacks, exactly. I feel like the stigma that hacks have had in the years past is fairly close to being broken entirely. That's probably good. Make it in creative, then build it on the server with baritone. Yeah, that's kind of the meta now. Hey Jack, if I want to play on vanilla, what tools can I use? Your brain, I guess. Realistically, you don't have any other options for external tools. If you're one of those, I want to play vanilla types, okay. Nobody is forcing you, but at the same time, you really should try to make use of all the tools that you can. That's just my opinion though. MS Paint, drawing a sketch, paper, building a creative, taking pictures, yeah. That's all really solid stuff actually, yeah. Your options are not too terribly limited, but you are kind of still limited if you're just pure vanilla all the way. And I guess I understand how or why someone would be pure vanilla all the way. I don't really have anything against that. I'm just of the opinion that you really should be using something else to help push you over the edge, to help diversify your building prowess and push you over the edge. A lot of the audience plays on Bedrock. Ooh, that's a very good point. Yeah, if you play on Bedrock, I feel very, very bad for you. Realistically, you have your brain and pen and paper. I don't know if there are any Bedrock, add-ons or the like, or whatever the hell it is Mojang will try to force you into paying for. I don't know. My expertise is extremely limited when it comes to Bedrock-related things. So, good luck. Make sure to add your own personal flair and your own personal touches. It'll help to develop your own style. What are good things to see for inspiration? Anime, video game, movies, all all the above. Any place or thing that would use details and designs, fairly intricate designs, something that really gives you a vibe, you know? Something that's really, really impressive. There are too many different sources to name, though. Too many different types of thing exist in this world. And then another thing that I use is just Google Images. Google Images is the bomb for this. And then obviously a lot of people have things on Pinterest and like, yeah, those are really great sources because people love sharing whatever it is they're doing, whatever they've seen, been, where they've gone, etc. Like, real world pictures are a great inspiration too. Anything of note, you know, if you see a thing and it speaks to you, well, there you go. That's probably a good enough reason to use it as inspiration. Step 5, lighting everything up in a unique way makes the place feel warmer and more lived in. It gives it a greater depth of character and creates a sort of unified story with how the setting itself is portrayed. Gives you a sort of identity. Just all throughout the build, sporadically, you will see these gaps with sculpt behind them, and that's where most of the lighting sources come from. So yeah, don't be afraid to make a unique experience. But yes, lighting is one of the most crucial elements of any build. How and why it is seen will entirely depend on the lighting mechanism you use. Now you can understand why I say that it gives it a deeper identity, a sort of character all its own. Make sure that you've carefully considered how you want your lighting to cascade through a room. Don't be afraid to experiment either. It is inherently trial and error fueled experience until you really understand what it is you want. Number 6, small details like plants or tables or chairs, etc. will make a space feel alive. So it's the little details that matter. Little bits and bobs here and there, you know. That kind of dovetails nicely with the geometry point that I made earlier, how I, little details like candles here in this instance. Really good idea. Another important little detail would be something like these white pale oak buttons that I love to sprinkle around here or there. So number 7, start with a generalized shape of the build and then refine it down with smaller details. I will use some screenshots here to illustrate what I mean. How you start with this applies more to the outside of the base than the inside. But you start with a general shape, and then you just go down from there. When you saw me making this room, you saw me starting with an outline, covering this sort of outer wall, building it up. I started with a generalized shape, and then I started carving detail into it. You can kind of blend some steps together. You don't have to necessarily hit these in numerical order, but maybe figuring out what steps to use and in what order is the challenge, and then blending them accordingly. And then number 8 is also not super relevant, but not for this room, but certainly for the build as a whole, it could be relevant. And that is sketching out your ideas digitally or on paper will help bring your ideas to life far more readily. If you have the ability to artistically capture the feeling of what you're going for. So if you can, in your mind's eye, capture an idea similar to this and then scrawl it out on paper, digital, physical, doesn't matter. And then you can use that as a way to, be a guidepost or a sort of, it's a good way to get rough ideas out of your mind and then give them a form, give them a name, give them a thing, give it a goal for you to hit. And then lastly, numbers 9 and 10. I'm not gonna lie, this is kind of all one point. I was kind of running out of ideas at this point, so you can truncate these down to one point or merge the two. Number 9 and 10, determination and drive will what see your build to fruition. In other words, don't give up just because you got griefed or because people figured out where you lived or people stole your stash or whatever. Don't give up just because you have setbacks. Your determination and your drive will be the thing that sees you to completion. And so never give up. Trust your instincts. And that's it. That's my 10-point process. Obviously, you can shorten that down to 9 points if you so wish. I hope that I've been able to cobble together this room in a reasonably convincing manner to kind of give you a good stepping stone to figuring out where you want to take your rooms and your places and your builds. Because it all starts big for me, and then I whittle down to the smaller details. And even for a tiny-ish room, this isn't a big room, but it's not a very... Maybe it's a small room, maybe it's a medium-sized room, depending on your perspective. But I will say that starting with the outline, starting with the general kind of vibe and the general shape of it all, you know, and then working down to the smaller, finer details, that is the best way to really give you a good shot at completing your stuff. Step 1, how to draw an owl. Draw an oval. Step 2, draw the body. And then step 3, just draw the rest of the fucking owl. Like, what are you doing? Just draw the rest of the fucking owl, guys. Come on. TNT and gold pressure plates can add sparks to any build.